Hi, Dr. Florian Birkmayer here from AromaGnosis. And I just wanted to share some thoughts about individuation and individualism because I think there's a lot of confusion, and I think that individualism, this ideology, this unconscious pattern, creates a lot of anxiety and pressure in a lot of people. So I think it's important to be aware of how this unconscious societal pattern shapes us. So first, let's talk about the two terms individualism versus individuation. When I first came across Jung's term individuation, I didn't really know what he meant. And for Jung, individuation is really, in a nutshell, discovering our personal myth, really becoming our authentic self, our truly ourselves in a way that no one else is like us. And that's individuation. And it's really a lifelong path. And it's really, according to Jung, when we embrace sort of the natural stages of our psyche's growth in the alchemical stages, it's just a really good way to recognize those, that we are able to individuate. It has individuation in that regard is really confronting our unconscious patterns and our ego continually being challenged. Again, every alchemical stage is uncomfortable, and personal growth is hard. I always say Jesus and the Buddha didn't have easy lives. Our ego is sort of very good at saying, let's just keep everything going the way it is, let's maintain the status quo. So it really takes a lot of ego frustration and being willing to embrace ego frustration and letting go of the dearly held ego programming in order to individuate. So that's individuation. Individualism, is really a dominant and yet to some extent mostly unconscious ideology that we see very much in America. It's sort of spreading around the world, and it's sort of this, in a nutshell, this I can do anything I want, I can be anyone I want. Again, I think it's very prevalent in America, and it is spreading other places. But there is a hollowness, there's an anxiety at the center of this individualism, and I think that creates a lot of confusion. And when people follow this ideology, then they're not really sure why they're not happier or why their lives are not more fulfilled. They may focus on ego goals, societal goals, going to college, getting a career, aiming for all the external trappings of success, money, materialism, possessions. But there's often this sense of, there must be more to life. Why am I unhappy if I have all these things? And I think that's because fundamentally individualism is hollow. I think individualism in America and more in Europe and other parts of the world is really a symptom of a sense of cut-offness, that deep cut-offness. So many of our American friends and clients are like, European Americans, I should say, oh yeah, I think I have some ancestry, Irish, English, French, but I don't really know anything about that. And then, obviously it happens with anybody who's an immigrant, that there's really this sense of cut-offness, that there was pressure. I always say the price for being admitted to the melting pot is like when you melt down a gold coin, the individual shape of the gold coin disappears in the melting pot. So there is an element of having to give up one's identity. I know that happened especially with German American immigrants over the last 100 years, both following World War I and World War II. There was a sense that those traditions should not be kept alive because they were suspicious and scorned. And so there was a lot of, we can't speak German anymore, we need to speak English. German language newspapers in Chicago and New York disappeared. There used to be dozens 120 years ago. And I think the same happens in other communities. And so out of this vacuum, out of this sense of cut-offness, which is really a very pervasive and pernicious and invisible form of transgenerational trauma, out of that cut-offness that's intrinsic really to the immigrant experience, comes this cult of individualism that is a false promise, and I think also is quite responsible for colonization, slavery, the genocide of Native Americans, because there's this sort of, it's my manifest destiny that I have to make these things happen here. There isn't this togetherness. There's an intrinsic sense of difference. I'm different, I'm better, that people, a lot of them don't even know it's there, but it is really, it's like the water to the fish. It really shapes your worldview. And I think in many cases, this individualism is also a symptom of transgenerational perpetrator trauma. One of the symptoms of transgenerational perpetrator trauma is the sense of specialness that family systems often maintain. And there's often a rigidity to the family's ideology and really society at large ideology, that the maintenance of the family myth, the false family myth, is often much more important than the well-being of the individual. And so this idea we're special, you can do anything you want, and let's not talk about the past isn't important, all of those are symptoms of transgenerational perpetrator trauma, not just transgenerational trauma. And I'm not just making this up. The researchers on transgenerational perpetrator trauma have described these very patterns. So again, when we see this rampant individualism and this specialness in certain strata of American society, I think it's important to see it as a symptom, and like the water to the fish, sort of say, oh my God, there's all this water here, there's this way of which I've been brainwashed looking at the world. What is beyond this? And I think an interesting way of exploring this is there's a documentary, I think it's 5 parts, by an English filmmaker called Adam Curtis, and this is called I Can't Get You Out of My Mind. It's on BBC, and then it's also, I think, on YouTube. And I don't agree with his entire ideology, but he really traces the rise of individualism and how it was really, fostered by capitalism, consumerism, and he also traces it in other countries, in particular the rise of the wife of Chairman Mao and her sort of weird form of individualism. So I think just sort of to have a glimpse, like the fish becoming aware of the water, look at that. I can't stop thinking, I can't get you out of my head. And I don't agree with everything, and I don't agree with his conclusions, but it is a way of sort of saying, wow, all these patterns in society, I wasn't even aware of them. So again, these are my thoughts about individualism and how it's really a symptom of transgenerational trauma and transgenerational perpetrator trauma. And so what is the alternative? Again, I mentioned individuation. And one thing intrinsic to individuation that Jung talks about is really that in order to become who we really are meant to become, what really our soul's purpose is, what our personal myth is, we need to honor the shoulders we stand on, both our ancestors, our influences, and really sort of be aware of them and honor them, so that the ghosts of the past and these unconscious patterns that are inherited in families don't rule us unconsciously, but make them conscious. So again, individuation gives us that opportunity. So let me know what you think. Comment in the section below, and if there's questions or ideas you have about topics that we could talk about, let me know. And again, thank you.